Thanks so much for joining us today for this presentation entitled Making Sense of the New Microsoft Azure Certifications. Let me share our agenda. Daniel pretty much went over it. We're going to start with why are we here? What is the point? Why is Microsoft totally revamping their certifications? We have to understand where we've come to understand where we are now and where we're headed. I'll describe how the new badge credential system works in great detail. We'll walk through the Azure certification program so you're totally up to speed on how that works. I'll fill you with lots of practical tips, tricks, and guidance for your certification preparation. And of course, I'm here to answer your questions. So I want to underline what Daniel mentioned a moment ago. I'm here not just simply to run through slides. I'm here to answer your questions. So this is your opportunity. Please populate that Q&A panel with anything that's on your mind, okay? All right. So where have we come? You might be familiar with MCSE. It's gone through several iterations. Back in the NT days, it was Microsoft Certified Systems Engineer. And most recently, it's become Microsoft Certified Solutions Expert. And prior to this revamp of the Azure certification program, we had the MCSE and Cloud Platform and Infrastructure. The credential, I think, is still valuable. I'll get to that in just a moment. If you have it, congratulations. It's going to serve you well going forward, I say. But the issue that Microsoft Learning, I'm sure, figured out quite a while ago, and we IT professionals and test takers figured it out as well, is that to earn that cloud platform credential was a very heavy lift indeed, because it attempted to be a one-size-fits-all title. As you might know, you have to qualify in Azure administration, development, and architecture. And given how vast the Microsoft Azure ecosystem is, it's quite the rare person indeed who has equal skills. So it's difficult to get that. And actually, it's impossible now because it's retired. And that's why we're here for the next hour to learn about the new badge-based credentials. Now, if you did earn the MCSE and Cloud Platform, it's not going to drop off of your transcript. As a matter of fact, on this slide, you're seeing a tiny extract of my own Microsoft Certified Professional Transcript, and you can see that there's a section of your transcript for history. And even old exams, like when I earned the MCITP, some might remember that, the Microsoft Certified IT Professional. It was meant at the time to replace the MCSE, but it never really took off. Bottom line is, even your certifications that have since been retired formally will always be on your transcript. You can always claim that achievement, all right? So I just want to put your mind to ease on that, because these exams, let's face it, they're not inexpensive, and they're also expensive in terms of the time and effort that you put into earning them. All right, so long story short, the MCSE and Cloud Platform, it's retired. It attempted to be a one-size-fits-all credential. It really didn't fit the audience very well. So now we have, as of fall of 2018, continuing to today and beyond, a role-based certification program for Microsoft Cloud Platform. So here you can specialize in the specific job role that matches your aptitude and your interest and your career trajectory. You may come from a systems administration and network administration background, and you're attracted to the Azure administrator role, making deployments happen, automating those deployments, performing service configuration, troubleshooting, this kind of stuff. On the other hand, you may be a .NET or even open source developer, and you can qualify with that skill set specifically. Solutions architect, I've always considered to be somewhat of a blend between the administrator and developer roles, because at the least, you need to understand enough about each to be able to identify which Azure services fit a solution and how to compose them together to deliver the solution. There's another path specifically for DevOps, that junction between the different IT roles, administrator, developer, QA, and that's just the fourth of N number of roles. Microsoft Learning is just getting started with this role-based certification program. These are just the initial ones. So we see a trend. If you've been in the industry for a while, you might remember that your goal or one of your deliverables from passing a certification certification exam or earning a title was you'd be waiting for that certificate to come in the mail, and then you'd frame it and put it up on your wall. It's a legitimate source of pride. You still nowadays can order a certificate or download a high-resolution PDF from your own Microsoft Certified Professional portal that you get access to once you certify. But the trend seems to be moving away from the monolithic certificate and into this world of shareable digital badges. So it's crucial that you understand the deal here. Microsoft has partnered with a company called Credly, C-R-E-D-L-Y, and Credly in turn made an acquisition of another digital badge company called Acclaim, A-C-C-L-A-I-M. So they are one and the same now. They're the same company. Credly's the parent company to Acclaim. I say that because you wind up seeing both company names as you're working with your badges, and I just wanted to make sure we know what's going on. The badges offer several advantages over the traditional print certificate. Number one, it's a validated credential. You can share a link to your badge with whoever stakeholder you need, whether it's a company that you're interviewing with or a prospective customer or client, your manager, your peer, whoever. They can click the link and the badge link and see a verified summary of your badge, when you earned it, when it expires, and even more than that. I'll show you a screenshot in just a second. The badge pages actually list discrete job role tasks that are included in that certification. So it's a validated credential that's very shareable. You'll find that when you log into your badge page, there's embed links for sharing with Twitter, LinkedIn. I imagine there's Facebook. There's just a straight up HTTPS URL that you can put into your curriculum vitae or whatever. So they're meant to be shareable. I just like the straight URL links, and I wind up sending them out pretty regularly in my business life. I did just this morning, as a matter of fact. So sharing with social media, I submit that this badge thing, there's a gamification or gamification aspect to this, because, I've been a video gamer since the 70s. That's showing my age a little bit, late 70s. So the idea of earning badges to add to my collection is appealing. It just fundamentally is appealing to me. So as I said, this is intended to help you bolster your resume, enhance your career, bolster your credibility. Speaking of which, I hope that you follow Pluralsight on Twitter. We put a poll up not too long ago asking, why are you interested in getting certified in Microsoft Azure? And you can check out the tweet to find it. But the winners, so to speak, the most common responses were just that, to enhance your career and to bolster your credibility. And I hope you can see where these digital badges can come to the forefront in that regard. The slide you're looking at now shows a representative page of one of your badges that you can earn. And you notice there's that banner of different social networks. This is what I was talking about, where you can easily get embed codes for various services, or if you just want the straight HTTPS path. Also, your badge page, as I mentioned a moment ago, summarizes the metadata, when it was issued, when it expires, etc. These highlight boxes are a little off-center, though. But the skills measured is pretty important, because as you're looking for your next job, let's say, and the job requirements match what's in your badge, it lines up. It potentially could really line up for you very advantageously. Now, you might be thinking, Tim, you mentioned expiration a couple times. Do the new Microsoft Azure badges expire? The answer to that is yes, they do. They expire 2 years after you earn them. So if you pass an exam today, let's say the AZ-100, the Azure Infrastructure and Deployment exam, it'll expire on, at least where I am in Nashville, Tennessee in the U.S., February 12th of 2021. Now, you have to be patient, unfortunately, with Microsoft Learning. I asked Liberty Munson from MS Learning maybe 3 weeks ago, about what Microsoft's plan is for recertification, because if you look at the Microsoft Learning website, there's nothing there yet. And her response is, we're working on something. So it's evidently still under development. But from her optimistic tone, it didn't strike me that the recertification is going to be that heavy of a lift. That's about all I can share about it at this point, unfortunately. Now, specifically, how does this new Azure certification program work? What are the tiers? What are the exams? Does it matter what order you take the tests in? What do the tests look like? All of this kind of stuff. Well, in keeping with many IT certification vendors, the credentials are organized into 3 tiers. There's fundamentals, which is the entry level, and there's the I think it's AZ 900. It's called Microsoft Azure Fundamentals. Now, please note that the fundamentals exam is optional. It's intended for those who are new or newer to the Azure ecosystem. You do not need that credential to proceed to the associate or expert levels, all right? So what I generally advise is it's a good excuse, honestly, to dive into Azure and to look at some study and preparation materials to gain a ground level familiarity with Azure Platform as a Service, Infrastructure as a Service, and so forth. And then at that point, you may decide that you want to go further, say into the associate level, and form a specialization. Now remember that this list of badges and certifications is ever growing. The slides that I have are already a tiny bit out of date. Looks like everything here is good. Azure Administrator Associate, Azure Developer Associate, with more roles to come. Yes, that's certainly true. And then the top tier, the expert level, there's the Azure Solution Architect Expert, and there's another entire path that I mentioned this a moment ago on Azure DevOps. There's an expert level credential there. Now, what's kind of cool is that MS Learning has developed quite a bit of symmetry in these exams. What do I mean by that? Well, the administrator exams, the IDs are all AZ 100 something. The developer exams, they're AZ 200 something. The architect exams are 300 something. If you remember the 70- exams, there wasn't a great deal of consistency for all of those Microsoft exams prior. So I give MS Learning kudos for this consistency and symmetry. If nothing else, it satisfies my OCD. This slide shows the administrator track, and as you can see, to earn the Azure Administrator Associate credential, you need to pass 2 exams, AZ 100 and AZ 101. Now, common question, does it matter which one you take first? Technically, it does not. You could take and pass AZ 101 first and then do 100, or you could do 100 and then 101. You don't get the associate badge until you've successfully passed both exams, though. Understand that. I will say, based on experience, I'm not going to be violating my non-disclosure agreement with Microsoft, of course, but what I will suggest is I do suggest you take 100 first, because I found that there is I don't know if overlap is the correct word, but the 101 material tends to take for granted that you've mastered the AZ 100 material, okay? So just, put that in your thinking as you go along. It doesn't matter technically, but experientially, you might want to do 100 first and then 101. I did the same pattern with the architect exams, the 300 and the 301. As far as the developer track is concerned, this used to be 2 exams, just like administrator. There was AZ 200 and AZ 201 to get your Azure Developer Associate badge. But Microsoft Learning had some issues with those exams, and what they've done is collapse the 2 exams into 1. So developer is kind of an odd one out, in as much as, at least as of today, there's only 1 exam to earn your Developer Associate. It's AZ 203, Developing Solutions for Microsoft Azure. I can also say that the code you'll expect to see is C#, so be aware of that. Historically, when I've taken Microsoft developer exams, the first question the exam engine gives you is, do you want to see code extracts in C# or Visual Basic? Now it's assumed C#. For the solution architect path, we go back to the 2 exam model with AZ 300 and AZ 301 to earn the Azure Solutions Architect Expert. So you'll notice that the developer and the administrator don't have their own expert level badge. They terminate at the associate level. The architect and the DevOps terminate at expert. I don't know, honestly, if Microsoft Learning plans to add an expert level to the administrator and the developer. We'll just have to wait and see. All right, let's check the time. I'll check the question queue in just a moment. Yeah, more certification specialties to come. You know, there's even more than this. If you go to the Microsoft Learning website, microsoft.com/learning, or if you just do a Google or Bing search for Microsoft role-based certifications, you can get the most current list. There's a number of these credentials out for the Microsoft 365 platform, which you might know is what Microsoft calls when you're licensing Windows 10 on the desktop and Office 365, Intune, Azure AD on the backside. So there's a number of Microsoft 365s. It looks like there's 2 associates and there's a couple administrator. Well, wait a minute. 3 associates and 1 expert level. The 400 series is DevOps, and even more recently yet, not reflected in this slide, are AI, artificial intelligence and machine learning badges, data engineer, and another one for data analyst. So again, the general theme is Microsoft understands now that Azure is a big enough ecosystem to where a one-size-fits-all credential is unrealistic, and you instead can qualify only on those job roles that match your interest and your aptitude and your own career trajectory. All right? Let me pop open the Q&A panel and see what's going on. Thanks for your questions in advance, by the way, everybody. I'm just going to go ahead and read them live. How is the SharePoint certification path going to be changed in the new path? Long story short, I don't know. Microsoft 365, what I just had up on the slide, or I guess is still up there now. Let's see. Yeah. SharePoint Online would be part of that ecosystem, but as far as SharePoint Server on premises, I don't know. Another question, I've looked for reference books for the AZ exams, but I'm only seeing the older 70-. Are the 70- still valid? Well, for instance, Microsoft Press has the exam ref books. If you were studying for AZ 100 or AZ 101, the closest analog would be 7533, wouldn't it? Are they still valid? Well, they're valid in as much as the concepts that are in the book are still accurate. But you'll always want to use the exam page as your ultimate source of authority. You know, Microsoft Learning maintains a separate exam page for each exam, and in particular, about halfway down of each exam page, there's what's called skills measured. That needs to be your blueprint, and you need to make sure that you know every single one of those line items. Not just the top-level sections, but right down to the individual skills measured before you go in to take your exam. I can tell you, because I'm actually writing one, it turns out, Microsoft Press is working on the AZ exams right now. They're currently under development. Normally to do a print book, it takes anywhere from 4 to 6 months, so I wouldn't expect to see those books until late spring, early summer. But Microsoft is doing what they can. It's frankly really hard to publish books on Azure because if you've used Azure, you know that the dadgum portal changes almost every day. I mean, in my job at Pluralsight, I'm having to go back and make updates to courses I recorded just a few months ago because after the Ignite conference, the Azure teams totally changed how some functions, how some products work. So there is an element of you feel like a cat chasing its own tail. Now let's take a look at transitioning. Speaking of those 70- exams, you may have invested time, effort, money, the whole deal, in earning one or more of the old MCSE cloud platform exams. There's 7533, which was the old IT Ops exam, 532, which was the old Azure Development, and 535, that's the old architecture. There are transition exams that you can take to shortcut your certification to the new system. Specifically, you see here that if you've passed 7533 which is no longer available. 532, 533, and 535 retired at the end of calendar year 2018. You can take AZ-102, it's called Azure Administrator Transition, to earn your Azure Administrator Associate badge. Now, the transition exam, it's going to save you money because you're just paying for one exam registration instead of two. The content for the transition exams is a composite where half of the items come from AZ-100 and the other half come from AZ-101. The same pattern works. Let me advance the slide here. For the development, if you've passed 532, you can take AZ-202 to get to the Azure Developer Badge, although frankly, you know that it's only one exam to earn the developer anyway, so that's kind of weird. Like, I wonder if the 202 and the 203 exams are identical, you know? I don't know, I'm just speculating. Unfortunately, if you passed the old Azure Architecture exam, which was 534, you don't get to benefit from the transition. You had to have passed 535 to take the 302 exam to get the Azure Solutions Architect Expert, okay? You notice in the middle column of the slide, these transition exams, Microsoft originally was going to retire them maybe even by now, but they received such a good welcoming, I guess, by current MCPs that they've extended the retirement of those transition exams until the end of June this year. So you've got some time to work on that transition if you want to or if you need to. Let's see, anything else about that? Feeling I'm missing something. Let's see. If you've never taken a Microsoft exam before, the bottom line is you just go to the exam page, as I said, at Microsoft Learning. You're looking right now at the exam page for AZ-101, and you notice that there's a schedule exam button. Let me go back there. There it is. And then in whatever your local currency is, here in the States, it's $165. Now, there are ways to get discounts. Please be aware of that. If you have certain Microsoft credentials, or if you're a Microsoft partner or have an MSDN subscription, look around for ways to save money. In particular, I would encourage you to pop open your web browser, pop open your search engine, and do a search for Microsoft Learning Exam Offers. That will take you to a landing page where you can do things like take advantage of, it used to be called Second Shot. It's basically an insurance policy where for the price of a single registration, you get an extra voucher. So if you don't pass the exam on your first attempt, you can redeem that backup voucher to register again. You see what I mean? So it's a good idea to take advantage of that particular offer. And Microsoft has it running most of the year. I'm quite sure they're running it right now, as a matter of fact. Exam replay is what it's called. If you look at the top of this screenshot, it says boost your exam day confidence with exam replay or an exam replay with practice test. Final thing with registration, you can schedule your exam directly from the website, and you have some flexibility in where you take your test. Now, you may not be able to take the test from your home or office. I don't know if there's geographic restrictions to that. You'd have to read the metadata. But if you don't have a Pearson VUE testing center nearby that's convenient to you, and you're willing to adjust your home or office environment a little bit, you can actually take your certification exam from the comfort of your own home or office, which I think is pretty cool. I did it a few years ago when the program was in its infancy, and I had a terrible experience. But I've gotten verification from several people recently that Pearson VUE has streamlined that remote proctored delivery option so that it works a lot more efficiently than it used to. Okay, let me come back to the questions, see if there's anything else. Do expired badges get removed from your transcript? Honestly, I don't know because the badge system is so new. I'll make a note, David, on that. And if I get something back from Microsoft Learning, I'll post it on my Twitter. So if you're not following my Twitter, Tech Trainer Tim, please do so. So do expired. I'm writing this down right now. If past is precedent, the answer would be no, because with the 70- exams, even though some of them do retire, eventually they all do, they'll still be on your transcript. They just won't be in the active section. I have a feeling the same rule would apply for your badges. But the badges are so new that hasn't been tested yet because, of course, 2 years hasn't been elapsed. Margot asks, any idea on the timing for the DevOps exams? I believe the 400 series exams are currently in beta, which means they're in pre-release. Now, issues with beta exams, be advised that if you take a beta exam, you're not guaranteed to pass. I naively thought at one time years ago that if you were a volunteer to take a pre-release exam, Microsoft would pass you because they were so grateful. No, that's not the case. What's worse, unfortunately, is that you do not get your pass-fail result immediately when you take a beta test. You have to wait potentially weeks or in some cases a couple months, which isn't the best. I like the instant gratification of knowing immediately. But you are giving Microsoft good feedback if you take advantage of their beta program. So anyway, to answer the question, if you go to the Microsoft Learning website, you can look up the current status of the 400 series tests. Now, what about the general exam structure? As I said, you register and take the exams through Pearson VUE, that's their registrar, and I mentioned the online proctored delivery option. As far as a tip and trick goes, I would suggest that if you're going to use a testing center, do some due diligence and call and ask them what kind of monitors they have in the testing center, because my local testing center here in Nashville, Tennessee, has these terrible 4:3 aspect ratio monitors. They're from circa 1999, I think. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to complete some of my AZ-100 and I think even my AZ-101 exams because I couldn't scroll. The interface assumed a widescreen monitor. So, I mean, I think I was taking the exams early enough to where Microsoft wasn't grading those performance tests because I passed, and I'm not sure I would have passed if they graded them because, like I said, I wasn't able to complete some of the hands-on labs. So that's just something to keep in mind. Check out your testing center and make sure they've got good-sized monitors. Another thing about the exams is, and I did get this straight from MS Learning, you'll not be tested on public preview and certainly not private preview features. Only Azure features that are in GA or general availability status can appear on the exam. Now, you might be thinking, well, Tim, products go into GA every week, and that's true. I got it also from MS Learning that they're on a 2-month revision cycle for these exams. Can you believe that? If you've taken the older exams, especially if you date back to like Windows Server 2003 and Windows Server 2008, it would be Microsoft Learning would create 2 or 3 exams worth of items, and then they would just stay there for 3 years. Nowadays, the rate of change is such that every 2 months, MSL is going in and revisiting and tweaking and adding and subtracting these exams. So the notion of agile software development and continuous integration, continuous deployment is active with MS Learning with these exams just as it is with Azure itself. As I said, as long as you're taking an exam that's in general availability, you receive your results immediately, which is always nice. Now, specifically, besides the traditional multiple choice, single answer multiple choice, and multiple answer multiple choice, you can expect to see interactive items. They're just different ways for Microsoft Learning to gauge that you know what you're talking about. Now, I will say that regarding the multiple answer multiple choice items, the MSL item writers have really gotten good about not using trivial parlor tricks with their items. In other words, who doesn't remember in secondary school, say, you get multiple choice questions that are choose all that apply, that kind of nonsense. You're not going to see that on the AZ tests. If there's 2 or 3 correct answers, it'll say choose the 2 or 3 correct answers, and they might even say each correct answer represents part of a single solution, or it might say each correct answer represents an individual solution, you see? That what you're looking at right now is called a build, list, and reorder interactive item. And this they can be daunting. It's a good reason for you to invest in some quality practice exam software, frankly. So when you see this type of item, you don't freeze up, that you instead relax, take a deep breath, and dive in. What you're given here is a scenario and a problem to solve, and you have two things to do. Select n number of steps and then put them in the correct order. Another thing Microsoft Learning does that's helpful nowadays is that they award you partial credit. It's not if you make one mistake, the whole item is worthless. You do get partial credit for these complex item types. That having been said, never, if you're running low on time, never leave items unanswered, because if it's unanswered, it's guaranteed to be completely marked off. So if you're realize that you're not going to be able to finish the test in the time limit. Normally you get approximately 2 hours, 2.5 hours to complete the items. Just hate to do it, but if you have no other choice, just make random selections to make sure that you've answered every question. Case studies are pretty popular. I was disappointed to see case studies even on the administrator exam. Historically, you see case studies for the developer and the architect roles, but the administrator, the role there is deployment and configuration. But whatever, you need to get really comfortable with these. You put on your consultant's hat, basically, and just role play in your mind as you read a fictional scenario, some business. They talk about their existing infrastructure and what they want to do in Azure and what blockers or limitations they have. There may or may not be exhibits. There may or may not be code samples, depending on your exam. And then each case study is going to have a handful of items that relate to the case. Now, these testlets, as they're called, are individually blocked. In other words, you can move back and forth within a case study, but once you've answered all the questions and gone to the next thing, the next item, you can't ever go back. In fact, there's a few item types you'll find where once you submit your answer, you can't ever go back. It reminds me of the old Cisco CCNA exams, how they used to do that. Maybe they still do, I don't know. But that's just something to keep in mind. Newest to the table, Microsoft has been experimenting with simulations and hands-on labs since pretty much as long as I've been in the industry. I remember in late 1999, the old IIS certification exam, they had a mock-up of the IIS manager. So Microsoft's been trying to do the hands-on, what's called performance-based testing for a long time because, let's face it, either you know how to perform the task or you don't. So it is a legit way to measure your competency. As I mentioned earlier, the glitch I've found with hands-on lab items is if your monitor's not appropriately sized, you might run into UI issues. Note that these hands-on labs are not simulations. You're actually logging into a VM, a virtual machine, and you're in an Edge browser instance, and you're logging into the real Azure portal using some credentials that Microsoft supplies, and you're working with a Microsoft subscription. So it's the real deal. It's not a simulation, and you're asked to complete a series of tasks. You can look at it as an obstacle course. None of the tasks are particularly heavy in terms of what you have to do, but it's truly one of those things that if you don't know how to do whatever it is the lab instructs you to do, you're kind of stuck because there's really no guessing, all right? When you pass the exam or if you don't pass the exam, either way you're going to get your score report, which you see here. The passing score is 700 out of 1,000, or approximately 70%, but the actual numbers and metrics are much more complex than that. All you care about is whether it's pass or fail. In fact, let me just speak for myself. All I care about is whether I pass or fail. Honestly, don't stress out. If you just barely get above the passing mark, give yourself a hearty clap on the back. I've never in 20-something years in the industry been asked by someone for my score. It's a question, do you have the certification? Yes, but it's never been a question about by which margin. As long as you reach that pass mark, you're certified. Unfortunately, you could miss the pass mark by 10 points and not pass, which is really disappointing and discouraging. I totally get that. Once you pass your first exam, you'll receive a credential to log into a private profile page, your certification dashboard as it's called, at the Microsoft Learning site. And this includes some pretty cool stuff. For instance, any upcoming exam registrations that you have will show up on the appointments bar. And most importantly, you have one-click access to your Microsoft official transcript. You can print PDFs of your certificates, or what I really like, the badges. You can share or download those as the case may be. All right. Go back to the Q&A here. Suggestions for practice tests. That's a good question. Yes, I'm going to get to that in just a minute. Are there labs for all the exams? I think eventually, I don't want to be too specific because of non-disclosure agreement, but I would just say as a general rule, regardless of which of those tracks you plan to go down, you can expect to see performance-based items and case studies, and if you do not see either or both, just consider yourself lucky. Let's go with that. Now, certification preparation guidance. As we've mentioned earlier in this presentation, because Azure moves so quickly, and frankly, Microsoft Learning's horsing around with these certifications, we saw the development track alter significantly just over the last month or so. How do you find quality practice materials? Well, here is what I consider to be your primary sources of authority here. Number one, as I said before, each exam has its details page with skills measured. Specifically, if you look in the exam details skills measured section, there'll be a little blurb if the exam has some updates or if Microsoft Learning has identified some stuff that's going to go into their next update cycle. So you not only want to pay attention to the skills measured table, but also the paragraph above it to make sure that you're apprised of anything that's upcoming. All right? But that is your primary source of authority as far as what you need to know. Secondarily, there's the Azure documentation, which, as you know, probably is open sourced and it's regularly updated. There's the Azure.com site, which is marketing information, but if for no other reason, it's a good place to get news, release news about Azure products. I should have added to this. Let me come back to the slide, honestly, because I mean, face it, we've invested at Pluralsight in the past year and change very heavily in Azure. And so as far as pluralsight.com goes, what I would suggest you do is in your favorite search engine, look up the exam like AZ100 and then add to it Pluralsight Learning Path. And if I know we're at least working on paths for all the AZ exams, and if they're finished, they'll come up in your search results and you can find them. So a learning path is going to be a mapping between the exam objective, domains, and Pluralsight courses. Now, you might have noticed that Pluralsight no longer makes exam prep courses specifically. It used to be like I myself did the learning track for 7533. So it was really clear right in the title of the courses what exam they mapped to. But because the exams are such a insert your metaphor here, because they're so volatile, let's put it that way, it doesn't make sense for us to do that. So instead, we're publishing courses based on skills. And then we create the path documents that do the mapping between the exam objectives and the courses. But please note that all the authors who do teach our Azure Skills courses know the exam objectives and keep those forefront in mind as they develop the content, all right? And finally, I'll mention Microsoft Learn. Kind of an unfortunate name because it's so easily confused with Microsoft Learning. But if you go to microsoft.com/learn, they've got essentially a learning management system happening. They released it in Ignite last fall. There are tons, and that's my technical term of the day, tons of hands-on labs that function like the performance-based items do on the actual test, where you're logging into a sandbox, you're using Microsoft resources, Microsoft subscriptions, and it allows you to take the theoretical knowledge that you pick up, say, through Pluralsight courses and the Azure documentation, and cross the bridge into it being hands-on. The hands-on stuff is particularly important for the AZ100 series because the role of the Azure administrator is all about configuration. I designed this certification study pyramid model a long time ago, and I think it holds today pretty well, actually. I submit that success on an IT certification exam involves 3 interdependent areas. One, if you look in the 10 o'clock position, content knowledge. And this is, as I said, studying the doc, studying Pluralsight courses, Microsoft Press books, whatever the case may be. But that's interdependent with practical application. So that means in Azure, you could use Microsoft Learn to gain hands-on experience. You can use an Azure trial subscription, which is good for 30 days. There's a free tier in Azure, or if you have other sources of credit. There's plenty of credit sources available for Azure. You might want to go to your local Azure user group and inquire about what's called an Azure Pass. That's normally an N dollar amount credit that you can apply and, again, get some time to kick the tires hands-on, because you do need to know how to do stuff in Azure, not just the theory. And then don't forget about this at the bottom of the pyramid, test-taking strategy. Especially with these interactive items, if you're not accustomed to seeing them, if you don't have at least some degree of muscle memory associated with select and place, or called drag and drop, build list and reorder, case study, it can be overwhelming. So a good practice exam simulation software can help you cover that. I'm not talking about the illegal, the brain dumps. I'm talking about legitimate practice exam simulations. And the only vendor that I'm aware of that's up to date with AZ exams is MeasureUp. And that's good because they're, I think, Microsoft's only official practice test partner. That probably is why they're caught up. But what's cool about the MeasureUp practice tests is that they do include those different interactive items types. So you get to develop, again, some of that muscle memory in attacking and conquering those kinds of items. All right. I mentioned this earlier, to be on the lookout for offers. If you do a search in your search engine for Microsoft Learning special offers, you'll find they have this exam replay where for one cost, the cost of one exam registration, you get a second voucher that you can have. Now note that that's for a specific exam. So when you do your exam replay purchase, you'll check out, say, for AZ 400 or AZ 300, and the secondary voucher is for that exam. So if you pass the first time, that second voucher, you can't use it for a different exam. And you also cannot, not that you'd want to, but you cannot register for an exam that you've previously passed. I believe there was a time for far too many years where you could actually take an exam that you had passed more than once. But I tested it just for grins about 3 weeks ago and saw that the Pearson VUE engine will stop you before you get too far and say, warning, we detected that you've previously passed this exam. You're ineligible to register to take it again. And notice on the right side of this slide, the exam replay with practice test, that allows you to bundle a MeasureUp with the voucher. So again, I suggest you take advantage of those offers wherever possible, because these exams are not inexpensive for sure. $165 USD per attempt. There's a short URL that I created for you that brings you to that page, timw.info/MS offer. All right, let's go back to the questions. What is the link in your speaker bio? AzureDepot.com. Whoops. Rely, thanks a lot for that. That's a mistake. My Pluralsight speaker bio has an erroneous URL in it. Azure Depot is a domain that I bought a couple years ago, but I'm not using it anymore. So my speaker bio web URL should be techtrainertim.com. Another question. If you're new to Azure, is it feasible to go from fundamentals to architect expert without doing the associate levels as an intermediary step? That's an interesting question. I'll even go so far, John, as to say that you can bypass fundamentals. Remember that the Azure Fundamentals exam, AZ 900, is a completely optional test and optional certification. If you feel that your experience and confidence are such that you want to go right, do not pass go, do not collect $200, go right to the architect expert, that's fine. There's no prerequisites. You just go right ahead and register for the AZ300 or the AZ301. It's totally up to you. But I can understand your point if you were making it. I myself am a completist, so I like starting at the beginning. I can't for the life of me imagine just diving into Final Fantasy with Final Fantasy VII. I would have to go back in emulation and start with 1. Similarly, I'd be tempted to start with fundamentals and then work through associate, but that's not required. All right, next question. I'm a DBA for my company's on-premises SQL Server environment. Companies looking into DevOps concepts, possibly using Azure as an environment. I'm considering Azure training and/or certification, but I'm not sure what would be more applicable, solutions architect or DevOps expert. Any suggestions? Yeah, if you're embracing a DevOps concept, especially if you're aligning them in a Microsoft world with Visual Studio Team Services and Agile, Scrum, etc., then I say it would be more efficient to go DevOps. I haven't taken the DevOps exams yet because, like I said earlier, I'm interested in immediate gratification, so I'll take them once they've gone into GA. But the solution architect, I have passed both of those exams. There, the role has nothing overtly to do with Agile, Scrum, DevOps, CI/CD. With the solutions architect expert role is purely about looking at business requirements and goals and thinking about identifying which Azure products you need to put together to meet that solution. So it's a different focus, all right? Okay, next question. I want to follow the Azure Solution Architect path. I was going to start with 900 and then follow 100, 101, 300, and 301. But what I see now is only the 900, 300, and 301 are necessary to get. Okay, I think I covered this earlier. Let me recap again. The AZ900 fundamentals completely optional, and if you want to go for Azure Solution Architect, you do not have to do the 100 series or the 200 series. They are not prerequisites to earning the Solution Architect Expert credential. So it totally depends upon your role. If you're just purely a web developer, let's say, you may be fine. I'm going to get my developer associate and call it done. Or if you're a systems administrator, you may decide to do AZ100 and 101 and earn your administrator associate and then call it done. It really depends upon where you are with Azure now and where you want to be going forward. Next question. I have 8 years of experience in testing. Which certification track is best for you? Now, if what you mean by testing is Microsoft certification testing, that's good. I mean, it's important that you have the test-taking skills, but without knowing what your skill set is, it would be impossible for me to give specific guidance. In general, I guess I would just ask you, where is your sweet spot? Where is your skill set? Are you more on the IT operations side or the developer side? Are you truly more of a generalist? Have you embraced the DevOps engineer job role? Are you into solutions architecture? Once you've answered those questions, then I think it would be easier for you to drill in to a specific job role and associated certification track. Next question, any Azure certs for security? That's a good question. Not that I've seen yet, but that's a very obvious omission. I agree with you. So I would expect that over the coming months, we will see exams that use this new role-based badge approach covering various aspects of security, because there's certainly a lot there in the Microsoft cloud ecosystem as well as on-premises. I don't see any questions about it yet, but another very obvious omission are the Windows Server exams. How many of you are expecting the Windows Server 2019? I haven't, not that I could tell you due to NDA, but publicly available, no information at all yet about that, so we can just patiently wait for future developments. Oh, okay. I got a follow-up about the testing. 8 years of experience with QA testing. You know, if I were a quality assurance, a testing expert, which of the Microsoft tracks would be the closest role out of them all? I would, off the top of my head, I want to say look into the 400 series, the DevOps, but because I haven't taken those exams yet, I can't speak with any real authority. But it seems to me that the DevOps might be the closest role for you if you're experienced with testing, software testing. Next question is, would Pluralsight Learning Path courses be more in-depth from what you see on Microsoft.com/learn? Yes, in general. You'll find that at Microsoft Learn, at least as of now, understand that they haven't been around too long, only a handful of months. Most of the training at the Microsoft Learn portal is skewed more toward beginner intermediate, whereas at Pluralsight, if you look at our library, it really runs the gamut from beginner to expert in all 3 tracks. That is, well, 4 if you count fundamentals. We've got fundamentals, administrator, developer, solution architect. We even have a whole lot of DevOps in our library as well. Another question, are boot camps still a path to success? Is there a place to find out about these boot camps from Microsoft or other third-party trainers? If you have access to an Azure user group, that's a good place to post questions about boot camp availability. If you're a Microsoft partner, or if you know somebody, if you can tap into the Microsoft partner network, those are ideas for getting a leg up. I know they exist. Historically, they've been, you know, I've taught several of them myself, a very time-crunched, time-intensive path, and if you're experienced enough, they can be a good fit, but I can't think of any off the top of my head. Next question, it seems that the 100 and the 300 level exams have overlaps. Is that correct? Good question. Yeah, you'll see, I'd say an appreciable level of overlap with 100 and 101, the admin exams, and 300 and 301, architect. And I think that's to be expected because remember that Azure architecture embraces some development and some administration. So the answer to that is yes, there is by design or by necessity content overlap. And I guess if I was to look back on it, I think my preferred, if I were to take those exams over again, I would do this order. I would do 100, 101, 300, 301. Next question, can I share the URLs for the Pluralsight Azure Learning Paths? I don't have a way to post anything publicly, and it looks like we're getting down to our last 2 minutes here. So what I will say, Fatima, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, is just go to Google or Bing and do a search for Azure Learning Path Pluralsight, and you'll get a link to our learning paths there. Just try to buzz through. I don't think I'll be able to get through every question, but let me do a lightning round in our final minute. Plan for Dynamics 365. Nothing that I've seen yet, but that certainly doesn't mean that Microsoft Learning isn't planning on badges for the Dynamics applications. I'm a solution architect in Microsoft Tech. Should I go directly for solution architecture? I would say, yeah. I mean, that sounds mostly aligned with what you're talking about. It's up to you. And frankly, it's up partially to who's paying for your tests. If your business will comp you the charge, that's a good thing. Final question, does the Pluralsight Premium plan have the new Microsoft Cert Practice exams? Yeah, depending upon your Pluralsight subscription, you may have access to the, they used to be called Transcender, but now they're called Kaplan IT. Honestly, I haven't checked. I'm going to have to do that after I get off this call with you to check to see if we have the Kaplan. I'm thinking probably not. Last time I checked, MeasureUp is the only provider that's current with the AZ tests, but I'm very confident that eventually you'll see AZ tests in the Pluralsight portal in our Kaplan IT section. So I think at this point, I'm going to turn it back over to you, Daniel, for wrap-up. I want to thank you all again for joining. I hope you got a lot out of this presentation, and I look forward to connecting with you on social media in the future.
Thank you so much for that excellent presentation, Tim, and thanks to everyone who provided such great questions. We had a lot come through. Like Tim said, not all of them were able to be answered, but we're going to work with Tim to try to come up with some ways to tackle some more of those questions post-webinar. Tim, now you've covered obviously so much today, a lot of great material, but I just wanted to give you the chance to maybe share one final thought with the audience, one final takeaway.
Sure, and they're actually conveniently summarized on this slide. Now we're in what Gartner calls Mode 2 IT. Agility, constant change, build and release pipelines. This is all the present and future of IT. We see that's what Azure's doing, and so we see now that with its certification, it's no different. So I just want to encourage patience, acceptance of constant change, and acceptance of being a constant learner, because you've got to keep learning to survive nowadays in IT.